Leah, darling, since we are honoring the family heritage tonight. Mackenzie's voice rang out, sharp and clear over the clinking of crystal glassware. I thought it would be such a lovely surprise if you gave the toast in French. You know, to honor the roots. She smiled, holding the microphone out to me, but her eyes were ice cold. She knew I had not finished high school. She knew I had spent my youth driving logistics trucks, not studying languages in a classroom. The entire garden fell silent. My son, Tyler, looked down at his shoes, terrified to make eye contact. Mackenzie was waiting for me to stutter. She was waiting for me to crumble, but I did not flinch. I did not look away. I just stared right back at her, and in that silence, I realized this was not a family celebration. It was an execution. Have you ever been put on the spot just to be humiliated, especially by someone who claimed to be family? Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. I did not reach for the microphone. I did not stammer an apology. I did not run away in tears, which was exactly the reaction she had drafted in her mind. Instead, I gave her a smile tight, polite, and absolutely hollow. I sat down. I picked up my napkin and placed it on my lap with the precision of a surgeon preparing for an operation. The silence stretched, heavy and awkward, until Mackenzie was forced to laugh it off. A brittle sound that cracked the tension she had created. "Oh, perhaps later then," she chirped, retreating to the head table. But the damage was done. And so was my patience. I watched her navigate the room, her Ivy League degree worn like armor. Mackenzie believed that intelligence was something you framed on a wall. She thought wisdom was a curriculum you paid $200,000 to acquire. She did not understand that I had a PhD in survival. I had a master's degree in grit. My education had been paved with asphalt and diesel fumes, negotiated in loading docks at 3 in the morning when the rest of the world was asleep. She looked at me and saw a blank resume. I looked at her and saw a bad investment. This was not new. It was just the public debut of a private campaign. 2 weeks ago, at a dinner I paid for, she had interrupted me mid-sentence. I had said me and Tyler, and she had cleared her throat, touching my arm with a patronizing gentleness. "It is actually Tyler and I, Leah," she had said. Subject versus object. It changes the whole structure of the sentence. She smiled when she said it, eyes glittering. It was a power move masquerading as a grammar lesson. She wanted to remind me that no matter how much money I had, I would never speak her language. But the grammar correction did not hurt. The French toast ambush did not hurt. What actually cut me, what made the air in the garden feel thin and cold, was Tyler. My son. The boy I had raised on the passenger seat of an 18-wheeler while I built an empire from scratch. He sat next to her, staring at his plate. He heard the insults. He saw the traps, and he said nothing. He was trading his mother's dignity for a quiet life with a woman who despised his roots. That silence was louder than any French speech I could have given. It was a transaction I had not authorized. He was letting her erase me to elevate herself. I looked at them, the happy couple, the golden future, and I realized my compassion had been a luxury they had overdrafted for years. I took a sip of my water. It was cool and clear. The time for being the supportive, silent mother was over. If Mackenzie wanted to test my education, I was happy to oblige. But she was about to learn that the most dangerous lessons are the ones not found in textbooks. I built my first company out of a storage unit in 1984. I was 26 years old, divorced, and I had a 3-year-old son who thought a cardboard box was a castle. I did not have a business degree. I did not have investors. What I had was a terrifying amount of debt and the absolute refusal to fail. I learned logistics by watching traffic patterns. I learned negotiation by haggling for fuel prices. When the big shipping companies told me I was too small to matter, I outworked them. When the banks laughed at my loan applications, I saved every dime until I did not need their permission. It took me 15 years to turn one truck into a fleet of 40. It took another decade to expand into international shipping. I negotiated contracts in boardrooms where I was the only woman. the only person without a pedigree, and often, the only person who actually knew how to fix an engine. I survived recessions, fuel crises, and competitors who tried to undercut me. I built a fortress of security around Tyler. I wanted his life to be soft because mine had been so hard. I sent him to private schools. I paid for his tennis lessons. I funded his startup ideas that never quite launched. I became the silent investor in his life, ensuring he never felt the gravel I had crawled over. But silence is a funny thing. You think it is a shield, protecting the people you love from the harshness of the world. But really, it is just invisible chains. My silence taught Tyler that money appeared by magic, not labor. It taught him that respect was something you bought, not something you earned. And it taught Mackenzie that I was nothing more than a convenient ATM with a pulse. I had hidden my struggles so well that they assumed I had no strength. They mistook my quiet dignity for weakness. They thought my lack of bragging meant a lack of accomplishment. I looked at my hands resting on the white tablecloth. They were manicured now, soft and uncalloused. But beneath the skin, the bones remembered the steering wheel. They remembered the cold mornings and the heavy lifting. I had spent 40 years proving I could survive anything. And now, this girl, this child who had never worked a day of manual labor in her life, thought she could break me with a toast? It was almost funny. She was trying to drown a fish. I had been playing a role for so long, the doting mother, the quiet benefactor, that I had almost forgotten who I really was. I was Leah fucking Vance. I was the woman who had stared down union strikes and corporate takeovers. And I was done apologizing for the dirt under my fingernails that had paid for the diamond on her hand. The silent investor was about to call in her debts, and the interest rate was going to be steep. A week after the engagement party, Mackenzie stopped being subtle. She came to my house under the guise of dropping off updated wedding schedules, but her eyes scanned my living room like an appraiser looking for cracks in the foundation. She sat down without being invited, her posture rigid, her smile thin. "Tyler and I have been talking," she began, smoothing her skirt. "We are worried about you, Leah, managing the family trust. It is a lot of responsibility, especially as we get older." I poured myself tea, not offering her any. "I manage just fine," I said. "Do you?" She tilted her head, her voice dripping with fake concern. "We noticed you seemed confused at the party. The toast, forgetting the language. It was concerning. We think it might be time for a cognitive evaluation, just to be safe. We want to make sure you are still equipped to handle the complexities of the estate." I set my cup down. There it was, the sanity test. She was not just calling me uneducated anymore. She was calling me incompetent. She was weaponizing my lack of a degree to question my mental capacity. It is a classic move of the insecure intellectual. If you cannot beat them with logic, pathologize them. She needed to believe I was mentally declining because the alternative that I was simply smarter than her was impossible for her ego to accept. She needed to dehumanize me to justify taking control. If I was just a senile old woman without a diploma, then stealing my company wasn't theft. It was stewardship. "You think I need a doctor because I didn't perform a circus trick for your friends?" I asked, my voice calm. "It is not about the trick, Leah. It is about capacity. The world is changing fast. Legal documents, financial structures, they require a certain level of academic literacy." She paused, letting the insult land. "Tyler agrees. He thinks a power of attorney might be the responsible choice. For your protection, Tyler." My son. The boy I had protected from every hard edge of the world was now letting his fiancée sharpen her knives on me. He wasn't just silent anymore. He was complicit. Mackenzie sat there, smug in her diagnosis, confident that her vocabulary could dismantle my autonomy. She thought she was talking to a relic. She did not realize she was talking to the architect of her entire lifestyle. "I will think about it," I said, standing up to signal the meeting was over. "Thank you for your concern." Mackenzie stood, satisfied. She thought she had planted a seed of doubt. She thought she had won. But she had made a critical error. She had threatened my freedom, and in doing so, She had given me permission to stop being her mother-in-law and start being her adversary. I watched her drive away, and then I picked up the phone. It was time to audit the books. If she wanted to talk about capacity, I was about to show her exactly what I was capable of. I did not call Tyler. I did not confront Mackenzie. I called Arthur, my lawyer of 30 years. Arthur had been with me since the days when my office was the cab of my truck. He knew where every body was buried because we had dug the holes together, metaphorically speaking. I want a full audit, I told him. Every penny that has moved from the trust to Tyler in the last 5 years. And I want to see the invoices for this wedding. Leah, are you sure? Arthur asked. Audits are messy. You might find things you do not want to see. I am sure. If they are going to declare me incompetent, I need to know exactly what I am allegedly mismanaging. It took 3 days. 3 days of silence from me, while Mackenzie probably planned the color scheme for my assisted living facility. When the report arrived, it was thick and damning. I sat at my kitchen table with a red pen, circling the discrepancies, consulting fees paid to a shell company registered in Mackenzie's name. Venue deposits that were double the market rate. They were siphoning money, not huge amounts, just enough to be greedy, but small enough to hopefully go unnoticed by an old woman who supposedly couldn't read a balance sheet. They were stealing from me to pay for the party where they planned to humiliate me. But the real smoking gun wasn't the theft. It was the scholarship. I was going through the old charitable giving records, looking for tax deductions, when I saw it, the Second Chance Scholarship. I had started it 15 years ago for kids who had potential but behavioral issues, kids who didn't fit the mold, just like I hadn't. I pulled the recipient files, and there it was, Mackenzie Louise Sterling, awarded 2012. Reason for application: financial hardship due to family bankruptcy. I stared at the paper. Mackenzie, the girl who sneered at my lack of education, who acted like she was born in a library, was a charity case. Her Ivy League degree, her entire identity, had been paid for by my trucking company. She hadn't earned her way into that world. I had bought her ticket, and she didn't even know it. The scholarship was anonymous. She thought she was self-made. She thought her superior intellect had opened those doors. But it was my diesel money. It was the sweat off my brow that had put that diploma in her hand. I laughed. It started as a chuckle and grew until I was wiping tears from my eyes. The irony was perfect. It was lethal. Mackenzie wasn't my superior. She was my investment, and a very poor one at that. I closed the folder. The anger was gone, replaced by a cold, crystalline clarity. I didn't need to fight her for control. I didn't need to prove I was sane. I just needed to introduce her to her benefactor. I picked up my phone and texted Tyler. The toast is ready. I will see you at the wedding. I imagined Mackenzie reading it over his shoulder, smirking, thinking she had won, thinking she was about to watch the illiterate old woman crumble. She had no idea. She was walking into a buzzsaw, and I had just turned on the power. The wedding reception was a masterpiece of Savannah elegance. Live oaks draped in Spanish moss, tables set with antique silver, and a guest list that read like a who's who of Georgia society. Mackenzie stood at the head table, glowing in a dress that probably cost more than my first fleet of trucks. She looked every inch the triumphant queen holding court. When the time came for the toasts, she signaled the DJ to cut the music. The silence was immediate. She picked up the microphone, her smile tight and expectant. "And now," she announced, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "a special treat. As I mentioned at the engagement party, we have a deep appreciation for culture. So, my future mother-in-law, Leah, has prepared a few words in the language of love." "Leah?" She held the mic out to me like it was a weapon. She expected me to refuse. She expected me to be humiliated. I took the microphone. I felt the weight of it in my hand, cool and heavy. I looked at Tyler, who was pale and staring at his plate. The guests watched with polite confusion, sensing the trap but not understanding the mechanism. My gaze finally locked on Mackenzie. I didn't smile. I just began. Mesdames et messieurs. Bonsoir, I said. My voice was steady, my accent impeccable. C'est un grand honneur d'être ici ce soir pour célébrer non seulement un mariage, mais la vérité. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. It is a great honor to be here tonight to celebrate not only a wedding, but the truth. Mackenzie's smile froze. Her eyes went wide. I continued, speaking fluently about love, about honesty, about the hard work of building a life. I saw the French consulate representative, a man I had negotiated shipping lanes with in Marseille 10 years ago, nodding in appreciation. The room was silent, but this time, it was the silence of awe, not embarrassment. I spoke for 3 minutes, pure, unadulterated French, the language I had learned out of necessity to expand my business into Quebec and Europe, listening to tapes in my truck for thousands of hours. When I finished, I switched to English. Mackenzie thought I couldn't speak French because I didn't learn it at a university, I said, my voice projecting clearly. She thinks education only counts if it comes with a diploma and a hefty tuition bill. Speaking of tuition, I reached into my clutch and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I found something interesting while auditing the family trust this week. I unfolded the document. This is a receipt from the Second Chance Scholarship Fund, a charity I established 15 years ago for underprivileged students who needed a leg up. It seems one student received a full ride to Yale in 2012. Her name was Mackenzie Louise Sterling. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Mackenzie turned white. You didn't earn your way into that world, Mackenzie, I said, my voice cold. I bought your ticket. The uneducated woman you mock is the only reason you have that degree on your wall. I placed the paper on the table in front of her. Consider the debt paid. I dropped the microphone on the table. The sound echoed like a gunshot. The power dynamic in the room had shattered. Mackenzie wasn't the elite superior anymore. She was the hypocrite. And I wasn't the embarrassing in-law. I was the architect of her entire life. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the ruins of her own arrogance. The wedding ended not with a celebration, but with a quiet, devastating implosion. Tyler did not marry her. He couldn't. Once he saw the receipt, once he realized his fiancée's superiority complex was funded by his mother's hard work, the spell was broken. He saw her for what she was, a fraud. Mackenzie left Savannah that night, humiliated and exposed, her reputation in tatters. A week later, I sat in Arthur's office. I want to restructure the trust, I told him. Tyler is a good man, but he needs to stand on his own 2 feet, and I am done being a safety net for people who don't respect the weaving. We changed everything. The bulk of the estate would no longer go directly to Tyler. Instead, it would go into the scholarship fund. We expanded it, renaming it the Leah Vance Initiative for Grit and Character. It was no longer just about financial need, it was about spirit. We looked for kids who worked jobs after school, kids who took care of their siblings, kids who understood the value of $1 because they had earned it. I wanted to fund the next generation of fighters, not the next generation of Mackenzies. Tyler was hurt at first, but he understood. He started working at the company not in management but on the loading dock. He wanted to learn the business from the ground up, the way I had. It was the first time I had been proud of him in years. He was finally building his own calluses. I spend my mornings in the garden now. I drink my tea and watch the sun come up over the river. I don't feel the need to prove myself anymore. I don't need a degree on the wall to know my worth. My legacy isn't in a diploma. It's in the hundreds of students who are getting a chance because of my work. It's in the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you built your life with your own 2 hands. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't destruction. It's construction. It's building something so undeniable, so solid, that no amount of elitism can tear it down. I cut the toxic ties, not out of hate, but out of self-respect. And in the silence that followed, I finally found my peace. If this story reminded you that your worth isn't defined by a piece of paper, hit that like button and share this with someone who needs to hear it. And tell me in the comments, what's a hidden talent or success you have that people underestimate? I read every single one.